Welcome back. This is part 4 of the Query Builder UI. This is Sunday, um, July 17th. Yeah. I was going to work on it some more last evening, then I decided not to. I just played some Monster Hunter instead. But I'm going to come back to this now and then work on some of the stuff I said I was going to yesterday. So, real quick, kind of just after the video, I did change some things that I did, and I didn't want to like film that stuff again because it was kind of just me being kind of wishy-washy about minor details. So really the only major thing that I changed is, if you remember last time, this was a maybe t. I changed this to an accept t, which is basically just the monad transformer version of either. So this just lets us have an either um, monad in the IO monad a little bit easier. So I figured it would be easier to do this because this would let us just run this parser, and then we can just lift that either into the IO, and then we don't have to do like any kind of extra stuff to change it from an either to a maybe. So I just figured that would be easier. And then this kind of defers showing the parse errors until we get to the event handler, which I know I mentioned last time was kind of a perk of writing this as a maybe, is that we didn't have to defer that parse error. We could just print it here. But on second thought, I decided that I actually did want to just, if there is an error, we just save it until we get to the event handler. And then that way we don't have these kind of like little odds and ends just doing kind of whatever they feel like doing. We don't have just like random prints just kind of anywhere in the program, but rather our IO actions pretty much all happen in the handler. So that's kind of what I prefer. So I changed that and then added a couple minor things. And that's where I left off. So let's see. Coming back to the event handler, let me find out where I am here. Right, here's our handler. I just got rid of everything in it. We're going to start fresh because there are some other things I need to add to it. So one thing, because our widget sentence branch constructor is now an IO, that means that we have to use a task to construct it. And so the way that Monomer works is if you have a task, if you run an IO task, right, that's how we have to run all of our IO actions. If you have an IO task, you can't just run an IO action and then just shove that into the model. You have to run a task, and then that task calls a different action, or that task calls a different event, and then that event has to update the model. So because our constructor is now requires an IO event to run, we have to actually have two separate events to handle creating this and then putting it in the model. So that's what we're going to do right now. Right, so we have this, our previous event, the append widget query node. I'm going to come up with a different name for that, but let me think what that should be called. I'll just call it like create new widget query node. And all this event is going to do is just read the global state in our UI and then create a query node, and then it is going to actually call our new event, which I haven't made yet, so I'll make that one too right now. So what I usually do with these, one second, sorry, I've got some stuff on my mic. What I usually do with these is I do have some events that are like this, where there's an event that calls an IO action, and then that IO action calls another event to actually put a pure value. And that's what these put events are, right? So these put events, like you can see, they all take these types, and that's because these types here are all generated through some IO action, and then that task, wherever that is generated, sends its result to this event, and then this event puts this value in the model. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to make a new put event. So we're going to just do a put widget query node. right? And then this one actually requires an argument. So we're going to require just a pure value widget sentence branch for that. Don't need parentheses for that. Widget sentence branch. You have to import that. So now we've got our two events that will help us create and then populate our model. Excuse me, sorry, with some widget query nodes. So I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna open this to the right here. Right, and that one's going to be pretty simple. So usually these like generation events are really simple. They're just a single task. These put ones can get more involved because not only do they put that value, but they might also want to manipulate the model in some other ways to update the UI or do some other things to it. So we'll have to figure out how exactly we want to do that. That'll be more clear when we get to it, if it's not already. Let's see. Where does this go? It goes after this one. Let's call that WSB, like so. Okay, so I'm trying to think. Actually, this put event is going to be the simple one, so I'm just gonna write some stuff out for this one and then go through that. So what we want to do is update our model, which I'm gonna also put it over here just so I can look at that. I can remember what all these things are called here. Oops. Like that. Simple. This lens operator is a setter, but it takes a function, right? So this is a partial function that still requires this widget query request, but because this lens field is our query widget request, this function just gets applied to that, and its value gets set to that. So that's what that operator means. Let me think here. What else do we want to do? I think actually, for now, I think this is okay. I think like our UI updates are actually, I'm gonna put those in the other task or in the other event. So I did kind of lie earlier. I said usually the generation events are pretty simple. I was lying about that. We're gonna have this generation event is gonna have a couple extra steps in it, right? So, but first of all, the first thing that we want to do is actually create our sentence branch. So let me just remember how to do that, right? So, what we'll do here is, let me think. We want to run a task. Our task, since this is an accept t, we have to run that, and that's going to give us an either value. So we have to handle the error that might appear, you know, if this parser fails, right? So these are all some things that I covered 2 videos ago. So like we're still kind of doing the same thing, right? Haven't really made any progress, but that's okay. Let me think exactly how I want to do that. So. Let me just try this. We'll just do this. That'll give us an IO either, I believe. Yeah, so that's I'm pretty sure that's what we want to do. Run accept T, then we have our connection here, right? Which here's our connection. We use a little what is this called? I forget. View pattern to get our connection out of our model, just so I have easy access to that. Our connection, then we need our set operator, so we'll put that there, and then our query text right there. So we'll go ahead and just retrieve that stuff out of here. Model, file, selection, model, and then our setup. Let's see, hold on. Oh, of course, right. That's an IO. Hold on. Let me think about this. I might just put this in a do. And then we've got our, I'll just call this, I'll just call it result. When in doubt, I suppose. Create, let's see, run accept T, right? Because we want an IO out of that. Run accept T, create widget sentence branch, con model. Very good at spelling. Query text. There we go. Okay, so there we go. We've got our either right there, right? So now what we want to do is either we want to either print that error if there is one, which is just a string, right? Because earlier in this function, since I don't have a parse error imported, and I don't want to have to import parsec just for the parse error, I just call show on it with this with accept T function, which is fine because that's exactly what we were doing before with our hprint, if you remember. So that's why this is a string and not a parse error, if you're keeping track. Gotta drink some of my espresso. Stay wired with energy. Okay, and so this task accepts an IO event, and so since we're in the IO monad, we can just create our events in here, right? We don't have to do something like this. We can actually just create an IO event while we're in this do block. So we can just do that. So this is where we're going to put our either result, like so, and then here we've just got our IO event. Let's see. What's wrong with that? Hold on. It's gonna take me a second. I think that, like, I've written these kind of things enough. I feel like I should probably know how to do this, right? I'll just chalk it up to the fact that I'm, like, talking about it as I'm doing it. That's making me kind of slow. How's that? That's what we needed to do, is an fmap. I think that makes sense to me. Okay, and then now our right value, right, needs to be a function that takes this widget sentence branch and produces an IO tagger event, right? So this is, that's what this event is for, right? So that's exactly our function right there. So all we need to do is just have that function, and then, right, I'm pretty sure, like, we can just do an fmap, put widget query node like that, or Man, hold on. Oh, of course. This is a file selection event. It needs a tagger event, so I just have a wrapper for file selection event here. This is an event that calls an event, or that takes an event and then does that event. So it's a little bit of kind of, maybe kind of jank indirection, but it works, right? So do file selection event. Like that. And then let's go ahead and then just try putting that. And what is the problem with this here? Okay, hold on. I'm being kind of slow. I'm just going to get rid of that type tool. We don't need that. That's just going to be return, I'm pretty sure. Yep. Okay, there we go. Thanks for bearing with me on that one, but we got it, right? So this is running that constructor, and then depending on what that constructor gives us, it's either printing an error or it is going to send that that success value to our next task, right? Or to our next event, which is going to put it in the model. So have some more coffee. Okay, so now comes kind of just some extra things that we want to take care of. So this this event is going to be called when we run a query, right? So we also have to think about what we want our kind of UI's response to be when we run the query, and we want to kind of wrap that up in this event so that all gets taken care of nicely for us, right? So right now, when you run a query, what happens is you write some text, and then you press enter. That query gets parsed and it gets run over here. But the extra things that happen is this text field gets cleared, and then the text that you wrote gets written to the history, your query history, right? So this text field getting cleared and then your history being updated are both events. So we need to take care of both of those as well, right? So those are both going to be pretty easy to take care of. Those are just going to both be model updates. So we can just take care of those here. And keep in mind also, right, like I said, this task is in a separate thread, so like these model updates are probably going to happen actually before this task finishes. That's really not important, honestly. But it's just kind of weird, maybe, how the order of things in this list is not necessarily the order in which they actually happen, which is kind of par for the course for Haskell, really, I suppose, with lazy evaluation and stuff like that, right? But we want to have our model. We want to update its text field, or that query text field. So we just want to set this to mempty, to an empty value, right? So text is a monoid, so it has a mempty, which is just a null string. We also want to update its, let's see. We also want to update its history, so let me think about. I'm going to go to the current query handler and try to remember how exactly I do that. Okay. Put hist. So we want to actually recollect that model's text before we clear it, right? Because we need that text still to write to history. So I'm going to just copy this, and then we'll just put it here, like that. So that is getting the current query text. It's stripping spaces from it, and then it's putting it in our file selection query history, which is just a data type that I have defined, right? And then after we put it in the history, we want to clear that field, right? So only after it's updated is it okay to clear that text field. So now we can clear it. Now we can clear it. And then what we want to do is run an event. And so this event is just like a task in a model, but it allows us to call our own events, right? So these events that we call with this event kind of keyword, I suppose, are not IO events. So event and task are kind of two sides of the same coin, where a task will let us call an event, but only if it's an IO event, only if it's an IO event. Event will let us call an event, but it has to be a pure value, right? So that's fine. So we just call this event, and then you can see here I had, wherever it is, here, this event, reset query hist index. That just, when you're scrolling through your history, it works on an index. So like if you have an empty text field, that's your 0th index, and then you press the up key, that goes, increment your index. So this just resets it back to 0. So we'll just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to copy this. So, pretty much what we're doing right now is we're writing an event that's going to replace this query event. So like we are going to get rid of this event eventually, right? So this event is going to look pretty similar to what that query event is right now. So I think as far as creating a new widget query node goes, I think that this is probably pretty good for an event. I don't think off the top of my head that there's anything I can think of I'm missing. I'm sure right after this video, right, there's going to be some things that I change. So if I do, I'll come back to it and talk about those briefly. But for now, what I'm going to do is commit these changes. We are going to then go and start working on the UI and just create some simple elements so that we can kind of just start, debugging and conceptualizing how we want this to look for us. So go ahead and take a look at some of our changes, right? Commit created events and handlers for okay. So we've got those. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and start working in the UI, right? That's going to be a little bit more interesting. We don't have to keep messing around in events and handlers forever, right? So let me see how much time has gone by. Yeah, 23 minutes, still a little bit on the low end, so we can keep going for a little bit. So, all right. Now we are ready to see kind of the spaghetti monolith that the UI code is for this, right? So we want to go to our interface folder, our widget internal. So this is all of the UI code in this program, and I'm really not very good at organizing it. So some of it is kind of commingled in a pretty bad way, so it can be kind of rough, but I think I know where to find everything, right? So first thing that we want to do is, like I just mentioned, we have this query event that gets triggered when you press enter on that query bar. So I'm going to just replace that event with our new event in our internal. So let me go ahead, try to find out where that is. It's like query text field or something. Here's our query text field widget, right? So that governs basically just this text box, right? So we have some hotkeys defined, some drop targets, right? So like this if you remember, maybe in the chat, I was talking to Guardian about how it's easy to drag and drop stuff in Monomer, and that's what this drop target is I just basically define an event that takes some data structure right? And then this just makes it so anytime you drag something to this, then it just does that event with it. So this is a drop target for a couple of different data types. To be able to drag something, you have to make it draggable, right? But that's really easy to do. So maybe if we see one of those, I'll show you. But it's super simple. But this is as complicated as making something drag and drop is in Monomer. So, right, it's one function, which is super easy and nice. So that's pretty fun. So here is where our query event is called. I'm just going to replace that with a whatever the name for that was. This guy. Close that. Don't need those. Right? And so it's that simple, right? So now when we press enter on our text, we're going to just run that event on our text and not query. So what should happen when I rerun the UI now, if I try to query for Qt or something like that, nothing is going to happen right now because we're no longer running a query and we don't have any UI elements yet. So we can go ahead and just start adding some simple ones to that. So right, so we wanted to add our UI elements to kind of this area. So these all reside in a Z stack, right? Because there's some widgets on top of other widgets. So that's in something called a Z stack. Here's a Z stack. It's not the one that we want, but there is a Z stack right there. You can use Z stacks to either stack stuff on top of each other visually, or you can hide widgets behind other widgets, like is what this is. This is a Z stack. There's two widgets underneath each other, and you kind of cycle through them. But let me try to remember where the Z stack is for this thing. So here is our focused file main pane, right? This is it. This is our Z stack. This whole thing right here is this right here is one widget. This is this image widget right here. And then everything down here are these guys. These things. These guys right here. So we want to put our query field, somewhere in here. So we just kind of got to figure out how to do that. We're going to have to move some things around to work with that. So let me think about how exactly we want to do that. So what I had in mind is take this tag field and move it down here, and then put the query nodes up above this query bar. So I think we'll do that first, probably. Yeah, let me think about how to do that. I think for now, we have this query widget, which I believe is kind of what these two things are. So we're going to just go ahead and put our nodes inside of this widget for now, and then we'll worry about moving these guys out of the way in a second. Just so we can get something on the page to help us look at it. Excuse me. Here's our text field. Here's our button. This guy, let's see. Actually, this whole thing is our button. So these are in an H stack, right? So they're horizontal to each other. We want our query nodes to be vertical to this, so we have to wrap both of these in a V stack now. So, but I think what I'm going to do before I do that is just kind of create some functions in here. So we have this kind of where clause to help us encapsulate functions specific to this widget, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So we will call it, what is it? Our widget query request, right? Is what that data type is called. New type, yeah. So widget query request widget. Perfect. Perfect name. So Since this is going to be kind of an encapsulated function, I am not really planning on moving it anywhere other than where I'm putting it right now. So it's going to be pretty tightly coupled with these other functions in here. So I'm not going to give it a type signature or anything like that. I don't really want to ever move it out from this where clause. So we'll just go ahead and do that for now. And then I know that this widget is going to contain widgets for each one of these sentence branches, so I'm going to go ahead and just start having some nested wheres in here. So like I said, this is really kind of a bunch of spaghetti. I'm not really super good at organizing these kinds of functions. So I don't know, bear with me. If you have any suggestions on better ways to do this, that's fine. But you know, some of these UI elements are pretty tightly coupled together, so maybe it's not a big problem for the actual function implementation to be like that. Widget sentence branch node, or rather, it might be better to call it kind of what more these events are. So widget query node. I'm going to call this just a widget query node. And then this is just going to be a V stack of these, right? So we can go ahead and make these, right? So this is going to be, trying to think. I think it's fine to do it like this for now. If something comes up that we need to change it, then we can. We have our model available to us all the way up here. Right, so that's why this is pretty tightly coupled, right? Because this does not take a model as a parameter. So if we need access to a model, it has to be available somewhere in the scope above it, right? So that's what I mean when this is tightly coupled with the function, with its function environment, is it doesn't have a model locally available to it. It has to be able to call on some model provided in a scope that's available to it. So luckily we have that for us. If we try to move this outside of this scope now, it's not going to work. We'd have to rewrite a little bit of it. But that's good. That's kind of what I want to do, right? I want it to be made known through the implementation that this is supposed to be kind of a sub widget, right? This shouldn't really be its own standalone thing. It should exist with other widgets. Okay, and then we need to unwrap that, right? Because that's a sequence, so we just need to call basically that record on this to retrieve the sequence from inside of it. Doesn't like that very much. Oh, of course, right? We need to call this guy on there. Like that, right? So VStack takes a traversable series of widget nodes, right? And so we already have inside of this model, we have this data type that has a sequence of widget branches, right? And a sequence has an instance of the traversable type class. You know, that's not a problem for us. The problem is that this itself is not a widget, right? So that's why we call this widget query node function on that sequence, or rather we map over it. We apply that function to each of its elements so that we can kind of transform those into widgets. And So this doesn't have a type signature yet, right? But this is pretty obviously going to be a function that produces a widget. And so that's what this VStack is expecting. So for this, what we're going to do is we need a widget sentence branch, right? So this requires something. Actually, we can't, right, we can't pattern match because I didn't expose that constructor, right? So we're going to have to either, like it says, use record patterns, right? Is it going to fix that for us? No. Or we just have this guy here. We'll just do that and then just call functions on it, right? So that's fine. I don't really mind that much. I mean, it would be nice to have pattern matching on that. Let me see where we're at time-wise. That's fine. It would be nice to be able to pattern match on that, so maybe I will expose that constructor, right? I could do something goofy and have like view patterns that would let me pattern match without necessarily having that constructor. I'm trying to think if there's a way that I could have multiple view patterns, because as far as I'm aware, you can only use a view pattern once, right? It's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to worry about it. We'll do this for now, and then, you know, figure it out later. So, and besides, this is just kind of a rough draft, right? This is just going to be so we can kind of make sure that our events are working. Then we can come back and make sure everything looks nice later. So all we're going to do for this is just make a label. You want to have a label config, and then we want to get that text out of our sentence branch, so we could just call this record. I have these in the wrong order, like that. I want to change this. Resize factor is just kind of a configuration thing for that. So, right. So this is going to map over every sentence branch in this sequence, and then just create a label out of each one, and then it's going to stuff all those into a vertical stack. And then now I want to put this somewhere. So let's see. We've got this in a H stack. I think what I'm going to do is wrap this H stack in a V stack and then put this above the H stack. Alright. So now hopefully what we should see, and I think we're ready to test this out with some kind of, you know, rudimentary tests here. And I'm really hoping that it works. But what we should see is that above this query button and text field is that when we start you know, running some queries, we should just see some labels that just show up above it, you know. They'll probably displace this tag field, which is fine for now. I don't really mind that at the moment. So let's go ahead and run this and see if that is doing what we want it to. Right, so there's nothing in there right now, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. There shouldn't be any queries when you start. Let's go ahead and just type something. And perfect, right? So there's one of our queries, so it did work. Only problem is that it's pushing the query down, right? So this is going to disappear here in a second. So, you know, there it goes, bye-bye. Okay, well, it's back, so maybe if it acts like it's going to disappear out of the screen, it comes back, so... There we go. So, right, it's working. We're creating those events and populating them, right? So, the thing that we can't see right now is that for every single one of these queries, we've already done some database reads, right? So, one thing that we could do real quick as well is we can keep going with this simple label here, and we can just stuff some more information in it, just for fun debugging purposes, right? So here in our label, we've got this guy. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of add some text to it. Let's go ahead and get a count of all the affected files, right? I don't care about this sentence tree right now, and that actually is not going to be something that we display in the widget. That's kind of like hidden information that we use to actually do things with, but this text and int is going to be things that we display to the user. So let's go ahead and take a look at that count and see if that is working in doing what we want it to. I'm kind of excited, right, that this is working. That's pretty cool. It's always cool when it works out. I expected it to, just by the way, like it's cool that it's working. I'm not amazed that it is. You know, I expected it. Whatever. Whatever. See? That's cool, right? 446 files for Qt, 134 for UE. Let's go ahead and just run a complex query, right? This, by the way, like maybe you would expect there to be more UE images. Maybe you think that I'm kind of slacking a little bit. I can assure you that that's not the case. This is just a test database, and this was made quite a long time ago, so don't be alarmed. There's not as many UE pictures as you might expect. Those are in my real database, right? Let's see what happens when we run a complex query, and hopefully, like nothing nothing unexpected happens. Season. This has things like, Christmas and Valentine's Day and stuff like that. I've got a lot of Valentine's Day UE pictures. Let's do that. There's 80. Oh, this is perfect. See, this is amazing. So I'm really excited about this. So this is coming along very nicely. I think we're going to leave it there, and then next time we're going to make some more events for clearing this, for running this query, right, so we can start looking at pictures, for reordering them, and then we're going to start to kind of tighten this UI up a little bit and make it usable again, right? So until then, thanks for watching, and have a good day, right? It's Sunday, it's stream day. Always the best day of the week, for me at least, right? So thanks for watching.